to Defending Windows in 100 clicks or fewer. That is just a joke title, and we probably will use more than 100 clicks. So why would anyone choose to use Windows? I would like it to be noted that I am a vocal Windows disliker, so I may not be giving an unbiased presentation, but here I am. Windows is popular because everyone uses it, right? Active Directory makes it super easy to have everything together in one place. Like if you've logged into any DSU network, if you logged into D2L, that uses ADFS, which is Active Directory Federation Services. So everyone's probably used Windows, only maybe like 3/4 or half of you have used Linux, right? But every computer that gets sold has Windows on it. So you might say that they have a stranglehold on the market and that they're stifling open source software, but that's your opinion. But even if you hate it, if you want to be a pen tester, sysadmin, you need to know how Windows works, even if you just want to hate on it more. Another thing I want to talk about is we're going to be giving you a lot of strats that may or may not be awful. They will work, but they may or may not be like the worst decision to make in a corporate environment. So like if you want to reset the firewall every second, or like last presentation, someone's like, I'm going to change my passwords every 3 seconds. That's not great for a corporate environment, even though it would get you fat points in CCDC. Another common thing that's probably a little more subtle is we don't use the GPO as much as we probably should. That stands for Group Policy Object, and it basically lets you configure all your things in one place and distribute it to all your computers. Not using that makes things faster and a little bit easier. But a real corporate environment would definitely want you to use that over like shell scripts or posh scripts. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't spend all your time studying for CCDC, because it's super fun, super enjoyable. You see these jolly young fellows in the bottom right. It helps you learn a ton. Also, before I get into this, you can go to questions.defsec.club if you want to ask questions. I'm watching it. And yeah, just ask questions in voice too if you want. So please direct your attention to the cool Google Drawings diagram on the right. These are rough ways that someone could gain code execution on your system. It's not all the ways, which we'll talk about more later, but it's a fair place to start. And here's what we want to fix. We want to do password changes, harden our services, set up a firewall, remove persistence, do some monitoring, and then if we have time, we want to polish. If you're new to cyber things, this will probably seem very overwhelming, and that's okay. It's good to be overwhelmed, because if you're not overwhelmed, then you're not really ever getting fire hosed with info. So are you really living? So everyone who signed up for the web deploy should have a VUp out for them right now with username underscore. Oh, I can get my cool pointer. With your username underscore and then the DW101, which is this course identifier. If you didn't, you can just deploy it to yourself, or you can just watch me, I guess. So if you want to see what that looks like, it looks like this. You're like, do. Oh, nice try. We can go into VApps, and then I can see everyone's, but you won't be able to. And then you can just search DW101, or it'll be right there. And then you can go into Actions, Power On, Details, and then you can view the web console, which will pop up right here. I don't know how long that will take you guys if you want to follow along. So I'll just sit here and creepily watch the statuses of your VApps. Great job. We're partially running over here. So this is the image. It's chock full of cool things, courtesy of local DefSec hero Lucas Miller. Oh, wait a quick minute. Does anyone have any comments or questions so far? They just want to voice how much they love Windows. They want to call me a pagan. No one? Interesting. Okay, well, back to the slides then. So this is your computer, right? If someone sees this computer, this desktop, and it's not you, you did something wrong. Someone is cybering you in a bad way. So this is the server manager. It's where you can manage your server. Windows loves to put a bunch of features in like one place, but somehow make it harder to use than if they were individual. and here's Firefox, which is installed for your convenience. You won't have web browser access on your vApps unless you auth. So you can just go to some kind of website if you want to download something for some reason, and it will give you the captive portal, which you can type in your username and password to. The number one priority is password changes, because everyone, when they do CCDC debriefs, they're like, well, we logged in at minute 0 with your default creds and then added 4 tons of persistence. And like, how can you change? How can you prevent this? Change your passwords. There were a ton of days or a ton of competitions where at the end of the competition, people would still have like half their creds as default. So that's easy, low-hanging fruit. How do I change passwords? Or why do I need to change passwords? So like I said, they can log into your machine if they have your credentials, be it through RDP, PowerShell remoting, WinRM, or psexec. Psexec is really common. It's built into Metasploit, if you've heard of that. But usually, if you're doing low tech, you can just use an RDP client, which is built into most operating systems, and just type in their username and password. In fact, I did that to right here. I'm RDP'd into the lab box. This could be a hacker. I could be hacking you. You don't know. So this is called remote code execution, or RCE. So you'll see that a lot. It's basically the holy grail of hacks, is someone remotely executing code, preferably as a root or a system on Windows. Persistence, if you haven't heard of the word before, is any method that someone uses to get code execution at a later date, after they kicked out, after the machine reboots, after you throw up a firewall, any way to wriggle the worry back in to your machine. So this is, for the majority of people, the number one hack is just default credentials. If you watch, you read cool write-ups, like legendary hacks, chances are somewhere in there's going to be a default credential used. And especially for CCDC, it's like the easiest thing and actually does a lot of work. So on Windows, you can change your system passwords through what I like to call loser manager, even though it's local user manager.msc, or you can just look up users if you're, into that. And if you're on a domain controller in an Active Directory environment, that's fine if you don't know what that means yet. You can use dsa.msc. Or we wrote a quick script that you can use, but that's kind of dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. Another thing that people miss almost all the time is if you're running WordPress, if you're running Magento or any other kind of web app, there's probably passwords built into it that are default. So like when the box creators make your machine, they'll leave it as like admin or root password one bang. And when you change your system passwords, those don't change along with it. So you need to go into the interface and change the password. So that might look like, that's the wrong one. Interesting. Somehow I lost my RDP. Found it. Okay. So we don't have WordPress on this machine, but if we did, you might open a web browser. Classic ILab. And then you can go to, like, we can take our favorite WordPress site, I'm sure all of us, blog.devsec.club. And then there's no login page visible, right? Because security by obscurity is a real thing. But you can go to WP admin. And if you left this as root password one bang, they would be able to add any kind of shell they wanted to your website. So something. You also need to be changing application passwords. So this is more niche and is very uncommon. But if you have FileZilla or something, there are passwords built in to it that you need to change. So something to be aware of. As you notice the thing on the right, I will slowly orange or green things out based on if we've tackled them. Password change script. Isn't this great? Things in bold are commands. The small text is comments. So the first thing we need to do, based on my very small posh knowledge, is we add some kind of library or an assembly. And then we create a variable, which is like a method or a type of generate password. I assume this is length and this is complexity. And then GWMI, I believe, is get Windows Management Interface. And the type of Windows object we want to get, like the type of thing, is a Windows 32 user account. This is like super great syntax, right? You can just read this and see and know what it means. You can. So this won't do the next command if it's like a ternary operator. It won't do the next command if it equals your name. So you don't want to change your own password with this script because you might get locked out. And then for each object it returns, it will run this command, which is net user change the password to whatever p is. So there is a flaw in this script. If you need to submit password changes, this probably won't print it out to the terminal. It won't print it out to the terminal as far as I know. So you can just add a print statement somewhere in here, or you can split it up into not one huge line. This is kind of dense. Does anyone have any questions or concerns? Well, make sure to test things before you run them at competitions. That's the #1 rule.
Is anyone following along and having VApp problems?
Is anyone having VIA problems?
I'll take
anyone-
that as a no. Go ahead and post in general if you are.
Thank you out. Yeah, they're just all stopped. Interesting. Unable to perform this action. That is 31 failed things. Interesting. Okay, well. Huh. Well, that's unfortunate. I must have messed that up somehow. So my apologies to the VUp crowd. I guess you're just gonna have to do it later when we fix it and just follow along with me. So service hardening, there are services on your machine, right? Just like Andrew talked about, everything is running some kind of service that you interact with. So every website, google.com, that's a web server, which is running a web service. You talk to the service, it gives you protocol data. So like HTTP will give you HTML, something like that. SMTP is what you probably use for email. FTP file transfer protocol, RDP remote desktop protocol, which is what I'm using over here, remote desktop. So a service usually runs in the background. This is called a daemon, or as I pronounce it in my head, daemon. And in this context, it usually talks on the network. So this is a scored service in a competition. Like the scoring engine talks to your machine, see if it works, and if it does, it gives you points. Hardening is what we're doing right now. We're making our computer more secure. That's the point. That's the crux of a lot of competitions, like Hivestorm or Patriot, and a indirect part of CCDC and long-form mocks. So web shells are a big issue that some people don't seem to remember exists sometimes. So let's take a look at our box. So the default web root on Windows is in inetpub in the C directory. So over here, we can go into this PC, and then inetpub, which is right here. Sorry if you can't see that. Inetpub, which stands for presumably Internet Publishing, and then www root right there, which is the root of the web server. And then we see we have index, and then we have door. Door is kind of sus, so let's check it out. Usually you don't want to run things by checking them out, but we'll make an exception. Door.asp turns out to be, looks like a web shell. So if I type dir and run it, which is the Windows equivalent of ls, we will see all the files on the system, or all the files in this current directory, which is Windows System 32 inetserv. So that can be useful. We can do things like add a user. Sure, so no return seems like it worked. And then if we check loser manager over here, or local user manager. Okay, well, the hello user does not exist. But you can run commands as whatever permissions the web server is running as. So a common thing to happen they'll run, like this is running as iuser localhost, or iuser, which doesn't have the perms to add users, presumably. So what a common misconfiguration will be, they'll run IIS or whatever web server it is as root or as system, which will make this shell basically be an instant free system shell from wherever. So that's really bad. You should be able to find that. in the IS configuration. There's like very weird IS. Yeah, you're probably gonna have to look up that one because I hardly ever do it. But you should check. If not, you can just check your services or your task manager and see what user things are running as. So if you're using PHP, we can prevent these web shells from happening by using disable functions directive in PHP ini. But these are really bad, right? I hope you guys can see how awful it is if you leave this open. So what do we do for services? We configure them and we patch them. This varies a lot because if you have a different service, the patching is going to look different for it. The number one thing to do is fix PHP ini. Unfortunately, this machine does not have PHP installed, as far as I know. But what it would look like is my favorite strat is I run notepad.exe as an administrator, because you need admin perms. And then I do Control O to open it. And then I find wherever the PHP configuration file is. Usually it's on like fast CGI somewhere, but I'm just going to pretend like something is it. Imagine not having text files in all your... Okay, well, we would find a text file somewhere and it would have PHP configuration. Okay, well, PHP ini, cool version. PHP configs start with comments that are semicolons. So down the list, you'd see like disable functions. And then it would have a bunch of weird functions like maybe time or something. PHP, who knows? But what you want to do is you want to add shell, shell exec, system, popen. And these are all PHP commands that allow you to run commands on the system shell. So if these were prevented in ASP, then this would not work. The best solution I would have for this one is just delete it, because who needs it? So to do that, I would just inetpub www be gone, and it's gone. Secure. Another really common thing you should do, if it isn't done by default, is disable SMBv1. So SMBv1 you may know as the culprit behind Eternal Blue, and that still hurts us to this day, especially in competitive environments. So what you want to do is you can open Posh. I like opening the ISE because it makes me feel cool. Integrated scripting environment. So I can be like set SMB server configuration, and it's not auto-completing. There we go. So it'll show you what's over here, what's up with it. There we go. And then you can be version 1. Nope, what was it? Enable SMB protocol, of course. And you can, this is tab autocomplete, similar to Linux, and then I could do $false. Yes, I'm sure. Action, okay. Well, I should have ran IC as root or admin, but it's not too bad. We did it. So that will, at least temporarily, until they re-enable it, prevent Eternal Blue. Which, if you haven't heard of it before, it's MSO17, and it's a super common way for people to get unauthenticated system access from the network. So they just send some packets to your SMB, and then SMB, due to a vulnerability, just lets them have it lets them remotely execute code as system. Another thing you should be aware of is if you have an FTP server. So many of you have heard of IIS, which is, I don't even know what it stands for. It's the Windows web server. It can also serve FTP. And if you have FileZilla, obviously you're running FTP. So a lot of competitions require anonymous read because it's easier to score. And if that is required, you need to leave it. But you definitely don't need anonymous write unless it's explicitly required. So make sure to turn that off. Also, SMB shares, really common low-hanging fruit. You can run fsmgmt.msc. Hopefully you guys can read that. That's file system management in abbreviated. So if we open up this menu, we will see shares, and these are all the shares. These are all normal. If it ends with a $sign, it's probably okay, these 3. But if we saw a bad one, it might look like new share. It's classic. And then we could be like, cool. Oh, that's a path. So C, I'm going to share the whole folder. It tries to warn me. I don't read. And that's cool. All users have read access, sure. So now I just shared my entire C drive to anyone who wants it. I could have made it even worse by sharing it to everyone permissions, but this is already pretty bad. So you should open up fsmgmt, and if you see like cool, just go ahead and stop sharing. So by now, our only big things is we haven't really taken care of a lot of persistence, and we're still vulnerable to most exploits and any unscored services we have running that we're not really sure exist. A little bit of a solution to unscored services, we should remove any services that we're not using, right? So the principle of least functionality tells us that if we don't need it, we shouldn't have it, because it can be vulnerable and maybe malicious. So if I head on over to services, you can do services.msc, or you can just type services. It will give me this big thing. It's worth noting that a lot of these, seemingly unconnected administrative prompts can be seen through MMC, which is Microsoft Management Console. And then you can just go through here and be like, yeah, I want to add a snap-in. And then you're just like, yes, I want the ActiveX snap-in. So if you see something cool you want, like I want SecPol, I can just add it. If I want to manage my certificates, sure, why not? If I want to add services, which is the other dialog I just have, I can add that. And then it'll be right here, and it makes it a little easier. So as you see, this is equivalent to the services standalone. So while you're in this list, you can just scroll through, right? But if you know what you're looking for, like let's say I was looking through it and I'm like, net command service sounds kind of weird. And then I accidentally close it or I forget something, I can type just the first letter and jump to it. This works also for the file explorer. If you're like over here and you're like, well, I really want to get to my host file, but I can't stand typing so much stuff. I can go to System32, then I can go to like, it's in Etsy or something. Drivers. There we go. You can just start typing it, and it makes it a lot easier to navigate. And there we go. There's my host file. We did it. So cool trick. Anyway, let's take a look at this suspicious command. Normally, I would take longer to look through it, but it appears that the display name is net command service, manages user administration, and the path executable is net user net service backdoor 1 add. So I don't know if it's just me, but that looks kind of suspicious. So I would disable it, and if it was started, I would stop it. And you can't delete from here. You'd have to use the command line, but that's usually good enough if you just disable it. Yes, I want to save settings. Actually, I don't care that much. So that's services. Make sure to remove what you're not using. You can also go through programs and files in case you like installed it normally. And if I had a service right here, I would just, bop, get out of here. Great. Yeah. I don't want Mozilla to maintenance me. So another big thing, built-in services are big. So if you go over here to the server manager, which I alerted to previously, and you go to manage, add roles or features, remove roles or features, sometimes your server will have things that you absolutely don't need. Like if you have the FTP role, but you're a DNS server, that's something you don't need and you should definitely remove it. This server doesn't have anything extra installed, but it does not need RDP. So that's a different dialog just for fun. Then you can go to remote desktop settings. When you click it, you just go like dunk. Yes. Okay, so now, oh wait, I'm using RDP. No! I'm such a clown. Oh, I'm back. So remove RDP if you're not using it. And here's the server roles thing. So if I didn't want IS, or if I didn't want file in iskizzy services, I could just remove it. For example, what if I wanted to remove the web server? Goodbye. And then I click next, and it removes it. Great. So I'll wait a bit for that. Yep. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. So the Windows firewall, we'll talk about this later in a different meeting by someone else, but it is very cool, and it's pretty quick and easy once you get to know how it works. So I have too many windows open, but I can launch this by pressing, to open this run prompt, I'm pressing Windows R, which you can also right click on this and click run, if that makes you happier. For now, we can do wf.msc, which stands for Windows Firewall. And then we see Windows Defender Firewall is off for all 3 profiles. We won't talk about what profiles are right now, but you should just turn them all on. Yep, yep, yep. And I hit cancel. So just go through all the little tabs and then hit OK. So I am still connected, which is great because I thought it might have killed me. So these are a lot of rules which you will get to know intimately if you are a Windows sysadmin and if you attend our Windows Firewall lesson in a week or 2. But you want to look for weird catch-all rules. Like I don't need Taco Bell delivery to my Windows server. I don't know if you guys do, but that looks kind of suspicious. So we click on properties. It says open up your ports. Don't appreciate that. So if we go to protocols and port, it says it's all ports and it's allowing them. So that is not a cool time. So I can just delete it. And then hopefully my computer is just a little more secure. Otherwise, you can basically just leave things alone. Just make sure it's enabled and you delete any weird catch-all rules. Again, you'll get to know what the normal rules are over time, especially if you're a Windows specialist. So don't worry that there's like 50 million rules. Don't worry yet, at least. So with that, we've cut off most unscored services. Like if we had VNC, which is virtual network computing, if we had that running in the background, it basically gives you an RDP session, but on multiple operating systems. If we had that, it would cut it right off. If we use the firewall and we turn it on and it didn't have a rule. In terms of persistence, if we tighten down our firewall, we should eliminate most bind shells that are shells that listen on our computer. And we should eliminate reverse shells that are not on a common port if we're doing egress filtering correctly. Like we shouldn't allow port 444 out of our machine because we don't need to be talking to any service on the internet on port 444. Any questions on firewall? Cool. It's kind of unfortunate that I somehow messed up the VApp deployment, but I hope you guys are still vibing it. Number 4, persistence removal. So as we said before, people want to gain code execution on our box, and we don't want them to gain code execution on our box. So we're going to employ some tools to help us accomplish that. There are so many methods. Twitter is just filled with hundreds of weird ways that you can get persistence. You can run a command when someone does something. Like at one point, I found something that you can, every time you open notepad.exe, it'll run a command, right? The registry is not meant for human consumption, but we have tools to help us. We can have EDRs, or in this example, we can use sysinternals. So sysinternal is super cool. I'm going to show you guys auto runs. So I downloaded it to the administrator's desktop, who is not me, but I will infiltrate them. All right, so sysinternal suite. This is a download you can get if you just look up sysinternals. And then we can go to downloads and click download sysinternal suite. That's all that is. So over here, we see auto runs, which is my favorite. Auto run 64, 64-bit version. Click it. And it loads up. It will ask you if you want to accept the EULA the first time. You should hit yes, or else it won't let you use it. So it's searching all its known places that people can run things automatically, like Office macros, image hijacks, codecs. There's a ton of stuff. So if we look through this, so there was supposed to be something, but since I'm not the administrator user, it seems that it's not starting up for me. So let me just hack myself real quick. So I'm the ASP user. So if you guys are familiar with a shell startup location, that automatically runs whenever you boot into your Windows session. So I probably do not remember the path. Another cool trick that you guys should know is you should definitely show hidden files, and you should definitely click file name extensions. So someone doesn't run like a, pdf.exe at you, and you're like, okay, .pdf, respectable. So also, if you didn't know that, if you click on the non-arrow part, you can just edit the path directly. I spelled administrator wrong. Great, so there's admin.bat. If we throw that in our own, because I want to be hacked, I'm tired of not being hacked, and then we run auto runs again, it should pick it up. So in the meanwhile, while that's loading things, someone asked, what is a catch-all rule? So that's basically permit any. So if you look at the Windows firewall, you'll see that it says which ports and which programs it allows through these verbose, gratuitous columns. And if it says remote port any, and it says allow, then that means it allows everything into the machine. So that basically invalidates every other rule on the system, since if you allow everything, then nothing else matters, right? There's no implicit deny, which is what you want. You want a whitelist instead of a blacklist, because then you can choose the things you want instead of saying, like, here's the things I know are bad. You should just pick the things you know are good. So if we look at this, we see that it has found something red. Yellow things are not found, red things are invalid signature, and white things are verified signature and found. So we see there's a lot of red things right here, but those are all there normally. I couldn't tell you why they do not have known signatures, and these are not found for reasons. Couldn't tell you. VMware seems to be sloppy with their signing, but this admin.bat looks kind of suspicious. So we could just delete it, or since we know where it is, it's in shell startup. We could just head over and see what it's about. If we click edit, we see it says net user add aspector1. Oh, look, that's me. And add me to the administrators group. So if I was administrator and I didn't want ASEP on my system, I would probably take offense to this and go like, delete. Yay. So that makes it a lot easier rather than having a huge checklist of things that you want to look at. So batch is like 2007 CMD antics. Most things nowadays are written in PowerShell or the PS1 ending. Batch files are written in .bat endings. So they both work. As you saw, admin.bat could have easily been admin.ps1, just two different formats. If you want to write a script nowadays, you should probably use PowerShell because it's more actively supported. But if you see one of these and you didn't write it, it's probably not good news because most official things on Windows will use executables. And if you direct our attention to the nice diagram on the right, we see by annihilating persistence, we basically taken care of this and kind of hurt the reverse shells, because normally reverse shells need to be on your system and run at periodic intervals to reach out. We're still worrying about rootkits. I'm always worrying about rootkits, but it's looking a lot better than it was at the start. Anyone have any questions at this point about persistence? I will take that as a no. So we're basically done with all the important things, at least in basic securing. And now we want to monitor for things. So another cool sysinternals tool, TCP view, of dubious quality and performance sometimes, but it works. Komodo kill switch is super nice because it shows you untrusted processes that don't have signed certificates associated with them. And Windows Defender, which has gotten a lot better. If you're on 2012, Windows Defender is called Windows Essentials, I believe, and it's basically worthless. But on 2016 and above, it's actually really nice. Other possibilities, there's BlueSpawn, which is an endpoint detection and response software made by the UVA team, which is the University of Virginia. They do a lot of cool CCDC things. Or you can just install a normal antivirus like Malwarebytes. So let's check out TCP view. I can just type it. tcpview.exe. Yes. Yes, I agree. So we see here all the listening establishing connections. So to make it a little easier, I'm just going to say show unconnected endpoints, like listening. Oh, don't show. Yeah, I'm not showing unconnected endpoints. So I want to see what's connected. So I see ssh.exe is connected outside the lab. That's actually me. MSWPT server is RDP. So this is how I'm RDPing into this box. SVC host is connected. If there were multiple of those, I'd be concerned, but it seems normal. And then Firefox is, of course, going ham. So if I wanted to see showing unconnected endpoints too, I would see everything that's listening. So we see SVC host, service host, is listening for RDP. RDP is enabled. For some reason, it's listening on port 123, and a bunch of those just died. So this is useful. You have to kind of get used to reading it, but it's a cool piece of software. Otherwise, I also downloaded sysinternals or Komodo cleaning essentials. To do that, you can just be like Komodo, and they're like, yeah, I guess I'll let you download it. That was the wrong one. So you don't have to pay for it. It's the second one in the help page. And then you can click 64-bit or 32-bit, depending on your operating system. I already did that. Of course, I put it not on my desktop. Users administrator, that is now me. And CCE stands for Komodo Cleaning Essentials. I click a few more times, and then I see killswitch.exe. So this does a lot of work for you. You can just like leave it running, and it'll probably help you out. Oh, someone said the problem with the VApps was that they all use identical MAC. So I could probably actually fix that. Right after this, I'll try to fix the VApp and let you guys know if it is fixed. But for Killswitch, there is no malware running right now. But if someone like popped an interpreter shell, we would see it. It shows you the rating right here of how sus it thinks it is. Right now, there's not too much sustitute on this system, which is good. So this is a cool program. I did not download Bluespawn, but you can look it up on GitHub if you're interested. And you can also help develop it if you really want to. There we go. Look at that. Bluespawn. Cool. You should check it out. In terms of other things you can do for monitoring, that's pretty much it. And if you do all those things correctly, you'll have a pretty decently secure system. Of course, the 6th step, there's always more you can do. You can really go ham on the security policy and the group policy, which isn't really something we touch at all. Don't save. So if I run secpol.msc, I'll get this menu, which you should get very familiar with. Yep, kind of a lot of noise. So if you go into local policies, you'll see security options and then a lot of useful things. So like one of my favorite is did not allow anonymous enumeration of SAM shares, SAM accounts. So if you do not allow, then people have a more tough time enumerating your SMB if it's a required service. So that's something to look into for a polish. Otherwise, users and groups, user rights assignments are really big. You can also see those right here. So I guess that's kind of a subset of security policy. But for example, if we checked out who can change the system time, locals, local service, and administrators, that seems all right. If you see anything with everyone, like take ownership of files or other objects, really everyone should not be there because I mean everyone can take ownership of anything, which is bad. So we would want to remove that. Otherwise, I mean, what are SAM shares and accounts? That's a question. I believe, I'm not a Windows expert, but I believe those are accounts related to SMB, which is how, you know, I'll just look it up. It's like Windows accounts because everything's kind of integrated. Security account manager. Yeah. So if you have a SAM share, I believe that's analogous to an SMB share, which is what I was showing you before was fsmgmt.misc. Okay, that doesn't help. But I believe that it means it can't anonymously enumerate these. So if you want to see like what shares are available and if you want to see what's in them, you would have to be logged in. So it helps reduce your attack surface. And if you want to get really deep in monitoring, Sysmon is really cool. If you want to talk to someone about that, Nick Alahina from last year, or actually he's still enrolled. He's Nick on this Discord. You should message him about that. And Process Explorer or Process Hacker, very cool Sysmon tool. Honestly, you could just go through clicking things. There's Sysmon. and process. Yeah, I'm just gonna, wow, be like that. So here's Process Explorer, spelled proc. Yep. So some of them are slower than others, but essentially that's something to explore. There's it's a wild world out there with Windows. So we're basically done. Here's the diagram, mostly greened in. You can I always am afraid of rootkits. Keeps me out. They could be anywhere. You would never know. But the diagram is obviously an oversimplification, right? This is not like I wouldn't put this on a white paper or something saying like I secured my box. But it's a good place to start. It's also missing a lot of areas, like I said before. The polish, you could do secpol, user group permissions, and like a billion random things. Like dep is something, right? Like if you haven't heard of it, it's data execution prevention, which is basically like the non-executable bit. Oopsies. sysdm.cpl, if you want another little run shortcut, will open this prompt, which is how you add things to a domain. Irrelevant, but still, you can go into advanced and then be, I think it's in performance, and then data execution prevention. So this is actually really like an important thing if you're preventing binary exploitation, but it's hidden away in like 3 menus. So it's tough, but it's definitely worth getting familiar with it, especially if you're tasked with securing a box, right? And I think that's part of the fun of DefSec, right? It's like it's a wild world, and you get to be the one to explore it. So yeah, that just about sums it up. Here's my big slide on how to get good. The best way to get good, not that I am good, is to practice and just have fun with something, right? Like if you want to do a stupid project that everyone else says is stupid, but you think it would be fun, then do it, even if it's stupid. Or if it's not, more power to you. Competitions are a great way to learn, like CCDC will be coming up soonish. Cyberforce is happening individually pretty soon. And we'll be having our own Maka competitions starting late this month or early next month. And yeah, projects are a great way to learn. You know, if you think you could do something, just try it. Even if you fail, you're probably still going to learn a ton. Another great way to learn is if you make a home lab. Setting up these services for yourself helps you learn all the idiosyncrasies. And what I like doing is I like making checklists. So if you're like, wow, I'm totally going to nail this competition, you can make a checklist. And then you can run it and see if it works. If it doesn't, make it better. You can also read and learn. DefSec Club, great resource. Don't know who did make stuff for it, but they're great. And if you want to read a book, the Windows Internal 7th edition is pretty decent. It's mostly operating system stuff, but there's some security stuff too. And you can just go on Twitter if you want. So yeah, that pretty much sums up everything. Here are some links. And if you have any questions, I suggest you contact local DefSec hero at Luke on Slack or luke.miller@georgesdsu.edu. And if you go to our drive, there's a lot of resources that you can just peruse at your leisure. And there's a lot of CCDC related ones as well. So yeah, does anyone have any final questions or concerns? No. How hard is it to RMRF a Windows box? I just want to nuke it. All right. Actually, let me take a snapshot in case I ruin this. Cool iLab tricks. If you haven't used iLab before, you can snapshot things. Who would have thought? So it is like the iLab was really confusing for me when I started using it, but it's a hugely massive it's a great resource. So if you don't know how to use it, just start like making things. If you break something, we won't be mad unless you do it on purpose, in which case I'll be sad. So oops, wrong one. So I'm gonna find the real one. Yeah, I totally messed that up. My bad. Great. Do any Windows experts know if this is even going to work? It must be deleting something. Okay, well, that's my presentation. Thanks for coming. If anyone has any questions, please vocalize.